And before we get started, I wanted to give you a brief agenda about what I'm going to cover. I have a few slides just to give us a little context, but we're going to spend most of the presentation in demonstration. Arbortext has been around since the early 1990s and has a long history with SGML, XML, and DITA. It's one of the first commercially available SGML editors. People argue over exactly who was first, but that's not our concern here today. It's the editor IBM was using when they developed DITA, and the R&D folks from Arbortext have been part of the Oasis DITA Technical Committee since its inception. Arbortext is the only out-of-the-box end-to-end solution. Since the acquisition by PTC in 2005, Arbortext has been focused on making sure the products are integrated and play nicely with each other. We've all heard horror stories from publication groups who've had to duct tape a solution together in order to get the full solution. And oftentimes, despite years of work, they never really fully realized the capabilities of a complete end-to-end solution. As a result, PTC has been hard at work smoothing the user experience so they can focus on delivering content without having to become software developers too. They push hard for real interoperability, cooperation between applications, because this is what their customers have asked for. What a lot of outsiders don't know is that PTC product development is guided by a customer-driven technical committee, and customers have a lot of resources available to them as well. But we'll talk about more of that at the end. Very briefly, this is what the system looks like to an Arbortext customer. It's a very simple diagram, not a lot of moving parts. All of the pieces know how to talk to each other out of the box. Today, we're just going to talk about Styler. This is Styler. It's a UI to simplify style sheeting and make non-programmers capable of maintaining and creating style sheets. But let's move on to the demonstration. Today we're talking about how to use the Arbortext Styler product to work with DITA style sheets. The way I thought we'd do that is to look at some best practices. It'll be a short presentation. We'll touch on the resolved document for styling that we use, and how to create a new style sheet, the location of the existing style sheets, and how to work with the out-of-the-box modular style sheet architecture. There's a fair amount of documentation around Styler and some specific documentation on using Styler with the DITA application. What I'm going to cover today is a recommended best practice on how to get started. Hopefully this will help people get familiar with the product and really the best way of creating new style sheets. I have open on my screen Arbortext Editor with Styler, and today we're going to use the Styler product to create a style sheet. The style sheet can be used to create output for multiple formats such as print, PDF, HTML. So we're going to start by creating a new document. We'll go up to File, New, and we'll select DITA book map, and we'll create a sample. This is going to be the starting point for my style sheet creation. This document would be a document that contains a lot of the different examples of formatting that you would want to have represented in your output. When you create a style sheet, you're basically defining the rules for how these elements are going to appear in the various contexts in the output. You want to have a document that represents the vast majority of constructs that you would see in the various outputs. In this one, we're going to create a sample, and I'm going to show you the document that we use to style or create our style sheets against. When you compose a document, a DITA document, it runs through the composition pipeline. The pipeline generates this intermediary document called a resolved document for styling, and that document contains all of the information from the map and topics. It kind of pushes some of the metadata down from the map into those topics, and it generates links. So it's a little different than the document that you edit when you're creating content. But you want to use this as your starting point, the resolved document for styling for style sheet development. So let's save this one here. This is going to be our sample starting document. And we'll go to Edit Resolve Document for Styling. This is going to take all of the content that you have in your map, all of the topics that are referenced, and it's going to run it through the pipeline. And you'll see this document looks a lot like your content, but you'll notice there's a lot more data here. It's a little intimidating at first, but what's important about this document is that it's the document that your style sheet is interacting with. You can also use it to troubleshoot any issues you have with linking as well, but I'll talk about that a bit later. You'll notice that in my original document, and let me bring these up side by side, you'll notice that I have this introduction to DITA and Arbortext, and I have it here in the original. And you'll see that I have the DITA authoring overview chapter. It appears here and here with all of the nested content embedded in it. So it's the same content. It's just now in the RDS document augmented with the additional metadata. So just to talk a little bit more about the RDS document, this is a kind of hybrid doc type, if you will. It contains information from both the map and the topics. If you want to interact with this document, say to go ahead and add additional cases or context for styling, we could save that off, and we would do that by choosing Enable Editing. File, Enable Editing. You'll get a message, but don't be alarmed. This is just telling you that the context rules are off for this document. The reason for this is that it's a hybrid document that contains both map constructs and topic constructs. So the DTD for this does not really match all of the different cases that are here. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this off. Now remember, this version is not really for editing. Just think of it as an intermediary document that you need for creating the style sheet. The changes that you make to this document do not get saved back to your original topics, and that's really how this doc type differs from the resolved document for editing. So just to touch on that for a moment, if you were an author and you wanted to work with all of the content in the map at one time, you could create this intermediary document called the resolved document for editing. Arbortext will create a valid window with all of the content and the map, and you can make any edits that you like. I'll go ahead and bring that up for editing. This is a little bit off topic, but I think it's an important distinction to make. In the resolved document for editing, it contains all of your content. You can do global spell check or find and replace. You can edit in this view if you prefer. And if you do make a change, it will allow you to go ahead and save that back to the file. That's the biggest distinction. The resolved document for editing creates an intermediary XML file that contains all of the content from your map. It allows you to edit that content and then save that content back to those topic files. And you can see the handy dotted line that shows you where the boundaries for that file are. Okay. Excuse me. The resolved document for styling is different in that it runs this content through the pipeline. It propagates the metadata from the map into the topic. It creates all of those different links, the hierarchical links, the parent-child links, any links you have in a relationship table. It creates those at that time, and then it creates this document here. That propagation of metadata and the creation of links, that information is not stored back to your topics. So let's move back to style sheet creation. Now we have this document we can use as our starting point for style sheet creation. The best way to get started for any style sheet developer, and it doesn't matter if you're making a couple of changes to the out-of-the-box style sheet, you don't ever want to change that content. The best way to get started is to come up here to the Styler menu and do New Empty Style Sheet. By doing this, we create what we call a driver file or shell style sheet. We'll call this our demo style sheet, and we'll give it a description. And we're just going to go ahead and select the defaults. You can always go back and change these at a later time. I can show you how to do that. So we're going to go ahead and choose OK. And now we have this new empty style sheet. So let's go ahead and save that. And we're going to save it into this demo directory that I have here. Notice it's a .style, and that's the extension we use for all of our Styler style sheets. We'll go ahead and hit save. But now we have an empty style sheet that has no content. And what we recommend is that you pull in the out-of-the-box style sheet as a read-only style sheet as a starting point for your customizations. Out of the box, Arbortext provides a very extensive style sheet that supports all of the data elements and attributes. What we're going to do is override those out-of-the-box defaults. You don't want to change the out-of-the-box style sheet. What you'd do is you'd go over to your install directory. And I have Editor installed in my Program Files, PTC, Arbortext Editor directory. And we'll go here into the application directory where there's the com.arbortext.dita. And in the doc types directory, you'll see all of the doc types that support authoring DITA content. We're going to go here to this database directory, and we're going to copy the database.style sheet style into the demo directory. And I've already done that. If you go to Properties, you'll see that this is a read-only, and you want to keep it that way. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a modular style sheet architecture. I'm going to add the database to my style sheet. File, Modules, Add, and here in the demo directory, we're going to add the read-only database style sheet. Now you'll notice you've got a hierarchy. I'll show you a more complex hierarchy toward the end of our demo. But what we're going to do for this case is we're going to show you how to work with a read-only style sheet and this flattened version of the modular style sheet that we use for development. Just for simplicity, we'll start here. As soon as we hit close, it brings in all of those style definitions that were in the database.style. By hovering over this module here, we can see that it's read-only and that it's located in my demo folder. It's an easy way to see this information. Once you start working with a more modular style sheet with one or two or more modules, it's extremely helpful to see where that information actually resides. You'll notice that everything is light gray. That's because it's read-only. The reason for this, and the reason I'm emphasizing the read-only style sheet, is that the best practice for any development, be it doc type or style sheet or whatever, is always to create a copy of the one provided out of the box, to put it into a custom directory and make your modifications there. In this case, we want to be able to leverage any updates that Arbortext provides in the future, any updates in product release. And by not altering the base style sheet, I'll be able to just plop in a new one and not worry about migrating my changes over to that new base style sheet. That's the important thing. Now, what we want to do is this. We need to alter one or more of these elements. So let's take this one. We're just going to copy abstract. We can either Control-C or right mouse button or use a menu item. We're going to copy it, we're going to paste, and we get this message. Don't be alarmed. It's just telling you that pasting this element, abstract, will cause it to have higher precedence over the existing element, abstract. And that's exactly what I want to do. This is an override, so I want it to have a higher priority or precedence than the element that's below it. You'll notice that when I pasted it, it gave me the option of renaming that element. Because I don't want to do that, I'll just go ahead and hit enter. Now you'll notice that this abstract element is bold and the other one is light gray, and that it's also italicized. What also happened is that the precedence category changed from a solid block to this icon symbol here. And what this is telling you is that there is more than one element definition for abstract in this file. The bold is telling you that this is the active element, and the symbol is telling you the same thing. It's a blue box with the white box underneath for the active element and reversed for the overridden element. And if I hover over it, it will tell me this. It will say that this definition, it overrides another definition in a separate module. Or it'll tell me this definition is overridden by the definition in another module. It's a very handy way of seeing exactly what the status of our duplicate entries are. I can sort on this column as well. This is how you would go about overriding Arbortext out-of-the-box styles for the DITA application. It's a very robust, very obvious, very powerful way of making minor modifications to meet the needs of your organization. Now, PTC redid the Styler UI in the 5.4 release, and there are a lot of new things to talk about. If you've used Styler in the past, this may look a little different. Before I continue, Janice, do we have questions?
If you have a question, please feel free to type it in the box. We'll give you a minute here. I don't have any questions in queue at the moment. So again, feel free to type in questions. If we don't get to them right now, we'll get to them in the next break. So Liz, I guess if you want to carry on.
Okay. So the next thing I want to touch on is the whole notion of fallback generalization. In DITA, you always hear about specializations. A lot of people don't really understand what that means. But what it really is intended to do is to allow for this fallback processing of information. All new elements are created based on an existing one. The best example I can think of is an unordered list. So say you wanted to tailor your doc type and create a tools list. You would create that tools list based on an unordered list. And it's very likely that the tool list will look exactly like an unordered list in your printed output. Well, in the past, when you were doing style sheets, you'd have to style every single element, regardless of whether it looked like any other element. So you'd have to style unordered list, you'd have to style your tool list, and every other list construct. With DITA, because we know what the base element is, we can fall back. And if you don't style the tool list, it will fall back and it will be styled just like our unordered list. And the reason I'm making an issue of that or bringing that out is that there are a number of elements in our out-of-the-box style sheet that are unstyled by design. Let me go ahead and show you what I mean. So let's sort by style category, and we'll go down to the bottom. I'm just going to hit Control-N, and you'll see that there are a lot of unstyled elements here. Make this a little bit bigger. You'll see there's a lot of unstyled elements. And you're thinking, oh gosh, I never finished the style sheet. Well, no, they're unstyled by design. We want these elements to inherit the style from their base elements. Now, Styler provides some hints to you, the style sheet developer, about what's going on here. We can say that it's unstyled, it's a block by specialization. And if I hover over it, say this context here, we can see what it's specialized from. You'll see the tooltip that says this is a specialization of section using the formal block style. So if we went up, we could take a look at its parent and we would see how that's styled. It's very cool stuff. It's difficult at times when you're editing to know what an element was specialized from. And I don't think that you really need to know in that case. But as a style sheet developer, it is important that you know, and especially important that you know, what elements not to modify. And if you look at this list, you'll see some of the main information types in DITA, like concept and task and reference, are not styled. They've been left unstyled. And you're probably wondering, why wouldn't you style those elements? Well, this is a very important concept to understand. When you're developing a chapter for a book, you can have a variety of concepts, tasks, and reference that make up that chapter, and the numbering is independent of what information type it is. So if the first section was a concept and the second section was a reference, the numbering should still be continuous to go 1, 2, 3. What you don't want is to have your title element, and that's where the numbering occurs for these different information types. You don't want it to be dependent on the type of information that you're working with. Let me go ahead and show you real quick. First, I need to go up here and sort by element, and then real quick, I hit T and drop down to title, excuse me. And in title, if I click the plus, I can see there are a number of constructs. Titles are used all over the place. Excuse me. You'll see there's a title and a topic, a chapter, a figure, a table, a map. And once you start to nest these topics, you'll see the rules for that. That's when you have a title in a topic within a topic within a topic. The numbering changes, and it may have a different font family, and it may have the size, either the size of the title is smaller or in a different color, or it's different because it's part of your chunked HTML output. Well, if you intermingle all of the task, concept, and reference, you would never be able to code all of the various combinations of those elements. It would be impossible. So what you want to do is develop your title context based on the base specialization, which is topic. So now it doesn't matter if it's a concept within a reference within a task. It will find the rule, which would be, let's say, this one here, and it'll use that one. For any combination you organize of the information types within your map, that one will work. So what would happen? Let's say you forget and you style concept, task, or reference. Well, what's going to happen is that you're going to look at your styled output, and all of a sudden you're going to notice, wait a minute, this one section isn't numbered consistently with the surrounding content. And you're going to be scratching your head and wondering why, and hopefully you'll figure out, oh, well, that was a concept and everything else is a task, and I styled concept. But it's kind of a tough problem to figure out unless you've been there a couple of times, so please. PTC is going to add more commenting to their style sheets, and they're extending the capability for you to comment yours. To the right-hand side here, let's make this full screen, there's a comment field. This comment column you see here was added in the 5.4 release. PTC is in the process of self-documenting their next style sheet and that they'll deliver. And they'll provide that type of information that will keep you from making mistakes. It's really easy to add a comment down here in the comment block. I can add a changed comments down in here, and then it would show. Unfortunately, I've picked an overridden element, so I can't type in there because it's read-only style sheet. But abstract, I have the override. Base. And it appears right here in the comments. So please comment your style sheets, make sure that you're documenting what you're doing so that anyone doing development can follow what you've done. It helps keep away those mistakes really easy. And Styler provides all of these kinds of things, little tips that provide you with what you need to know as a style sheet developer. It tells you, it gives you those hints. And basically, this is what all you need to know that's different about a DITA style sheet from other style sheets. There's a notion of fallback processing, and you want to take advantage of that to your best ability to make sure that you're not doing a lot of unnecessary styling. You want to make sure that when you style a specialization, that you're not going to break anything, like a numbering scheme or something to that effect. Just think it through. It's something you wouldn't have to worry about, say, if you were working in DocBook. There's additional information available for DITA style sheets that tells you whether it's unstyled and what it's a specialization of, and to give you those additional hints. It makes it a lot easier to understand. One of the complaints we hear about most frequently with the DITA Open Toolkit, it's a great tool, but it's really hard to configure and requires somebody with programming skills, somebody that really understands the DTDs. And what's nice about Styler product is that it's a tool that can be used by a non-programmer. It's very easy to understand. It provides you with the kind of information that you'd otherwise have to dig through a .mod file, one of the DTD modules to find. And we're trying to make it so that anyone, whether you're a person that's wearing multiple hats, you're the author and the style sheet developer, or whether you're a dedicated style sheet developer, it's a tool that just anyone can pick up and use. So since we don't have a lot of time today, I wanted to switch over and show you our best practice for doing style sheet development. But before I do, Janice, do we have any more questions?
I'm glad you asked. Yes, I do have a question. Can you add a general comment for the entire style sheet, for example, versioning info?
So usually that is not included in the style sheet. That would be included in the Arbortext solution. That's in your content management revision control history. It would not be in the style sheet itself. You can push that in and out, but you wouldn't do that through the UI necessarily because you want that to be automated. Go ahead.
Okay.
More?
All right. Yeah, I have another question. Can Styler easily configure styles that will control XSL, FO, pagination, sidebars, footers, etc. for PDFs?
So Styler does support XSLFO rendering engine and has one that it supports, and I showed that in the very beginning, but I can show that here again. Let's look at the style sheet properties. My print PDF options, I can use the APP engine, I can use FOSSEE, I can use XSLFO. Right now, by default, it's set to FOSSEE, but later on I'm going to want to have it be APP, so let's add that. How you write your XSL, this is for developing XSL style sheets. If you want it to run an XSLFO style sheet, you have to compose that in an XSLFO editing tool. This doesn't export XSLFO. But I could run an FO through its rendering engine. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. Okay, if you have any other questions, go ahead and type them in. I see no other questions at the time, so we can go ahead and carry on.
Okay, good. Glad I switched that to APP now because I do want to come back to that later. All right, so the first thing I showed you was creating the shell DTD and adding the flattened style sheet from the Arbortext installs tree. So, and I guess I should step back and explain what I mean by flattened. If you go to the install tree in the Arbortext DITA directory, let me go back to that. In the Arbortext install tree for the DITA directory, there's a Styler modules directory. PTC provides two types of style sheets, and we do too, as well when we develop our style sheets internally and for customers. We use a very modular style sheet architecture. Those modules are located here in the Styler modules directory. It's a little intimidating. There are 31 modules. But these are all modules based on the way the language reference for DITA is organized. You'll see that you have your typographic domain elements, you have your topic elements, your task elements, table elements. The reason why Arbortext created so many modules is that they figured that if you were going to specialize your typographic domain, you could just copy this little module here and get started with your specializations. What they've heard is that people don't really understand all of the modules, so they're planning on simplifying this, but you can create as many modules as you want after the fact. What we suggest people do when they're doing development is to use this modular style sheet architecture. So how would you do that? Well, let's go ahead and close the style sheet that we had previously. Excuse me. So, starting at the same starting point, we're going to go to Styler. We're going to create a new empty style sheet. And it's asking me if I want to save the other one. I'm going to say yes. So now we'll call this the modular style sheet. And we'll give it a quick description. And again, push OK, choosing the default. And again, what we've brought up is what we call the shell or driver style sheet. It's empty at this point. And what I did earlier is I came over to this directory and I copied all of the modules into my demo directory. We're going to go back to our style sheet and we're going to go back to our file modules. And this time what we'll do is we'll add the main module file. File, modules, add. In the style modules, the main module file is, of the 31 files, the main one is this top file called the dita.style. And that's what pulls in all of the other modules. So you don't have to worry about adding all 31. Once you add the main dita style, as you'll see here in a second, what it'll do is it'll go through and validate and add all of those modules. So it may seem a little slow, but it is validating all 31 modules. It's doing a lot of work here. And here we have, again, the hierarchy of modules. It's a really large hierarchy. All 31 of the modules are here now. And what's nice about it is that you can add or remove modules you don't want. So, for example, this module here, the common topic elements for Styler, pulls in all of these other files separately. If I didn't want the programming domain, it's one that's frequently removed. If I want to style sheet, simplify the style sheet because I don't use it in my organization, I can just remove that whole programming domain and it would go away. When I hit close, the styler panel is populated with all of the elements. Now, I went through and I changed these from read-only to write so I could make some changes. But you'll notice that everything here is bold. I would recommend, again, keep a read-only copy of the modules. What's nice about working with the modular architecture is that now you can sort by module. So if I were working with the task element and I wanted to see, I could sort by task and everything related to the task is all nicely organized. I don't have to jump around in my style sheet, like when you're working with your typographic elements. Here they are. We've got bold, italic, superscript, subscript, so it's a very nice way of seeing them. Because when you're styling, you're typically styling a group of elements that are all related to a particular construct. And maybe they're all related to the glossary or related to the related links, that kind of thing. It makes it very easy to organize your work this way. But the real benefit of the modular style sheet architecture is that once you've created this module, you can reuse it in your other style sheets. You can very quickly develop one or more style sheets just from leveraging these modules. A lot of our customers are doing page sets this way. They're creating a module and putting all of the page set information in the module, and then they create another style sheet that pulls that module in. It adds a lot of flexibility to the style sheet design and reduces the development time. It's much like a developer of an application would develop their code. They wouldn't put it all in one file. Okay, just a couple more things. You can move elements into another module. You can copy and paste these definitions, and they add up as you copy and paste. They end up here in the style driver file. Right, when we copied before, we had the bold abstract and the italics one, and one was in the base, and one was in our driver file, this top level style sheet. So as you copy and paste, and they end up in here, you might want to move them into another module, and you can do that right up here on the toolbar. I can move any object into a new module. I can pick it up and put it somewhere, so I can pick it up and use it somewhere else. It makes it very easy to create these style sheets. I've been to customer sites where they would have, say, 5 style sheets, and they copy changes from one style sheet to another to the next, and it becomes a maintenance nightmare. The best practice here is to use modules, have a single definition, and then override, if necessary, that style in an alternate style sheet. And it's very clear that way. You can look here and see, oh, this is how I altered or modified it and how it's different from the base. Like I mentioned earlier, there's this notion of precedence. It's true not only in this UI, but within the modules UI. You can go back here and you'll notice that they're in a very specific order. Excuse me. If I had a duplicate element defined in one or more modules, whichever module appeared first would take precedence over the one defined in a follow-on module. So the hierarchy is very important when you're working with modules as well as this UI. Before I continue, Janice, do we have any new questions?
None at this time.
Okay, then we will continue on. So working with specialized elements and relying on the fallback processing is really the strength of DITA, and you need to make sure that you understand it and that you leverage it. The Arbortext Styler product really provides a nice tool for working with these doc types. It's really appealing to non-programmers and to people who want to get up running fairly quickly. My last point then would be that a lot of people don't realize that this is one style sheet, and from this one style sheet I can create multiple outputs. It's what we call a multi-channel style sheet. You can go to print, you can go to PDF, HTML, create a web deliverable, all from this one style sheet. And it allows me to tailor, if needed, the different constructs. Say I wanted a different color font for HTML. So let's try an example, and let's say that we want to make our footnotes different in HTML. We'll sort by element, we'll go up to footnote, and we'll take a look at all the constructs that are available for footnote. You'll note, let me open it up also so we can see what all the contexts are for footnote. And I'll select footnote with ID. Down here in this tab in the description, we can see that we've made changes to the footnote that make it different from the other elements in the different contexts. It's inline, and we've tailored the footnote for HTML based on the different output formats. For Arbortext Help Center DMP, they're using font web. For the editor, we have a different color. How you get the information is to go here to Outputs to Edit. Let's scroll this up a little bit, make it easier to see. Down here in Outputs to Edit. If you apply a style to a base, it applies to all the outputs. Print, HTML, all of the outputs listed here. But I can tailor a particular change to just one of them. So let's go to HTML file. You'll notice that it's red now to tell you, hey, you're tailoring this footnote for HTML only. We can change the color and make it this pretty red color. But if we were to print this to PDF, it would still be black. The only output where this would appear red is HTML. So if you have content that looks very similar in the web output, or you just quickly want to produce some HTML output to review, the Styler tool is a great way to create a single style sheet that will produce multiple different outputs, and it provides the UI that lets you quickly tailor that output for any given deliverable. And then you would go back to your base outputs. And if I look at the print, I can see it is still black, and we're not going to edit it, so we'll just go back to the base. That was the last thing I really wanted to point out. It's a very, very powerful tool. People really enjoy using it. It helps balance all of the dimensions for style sheet work. It does a nice job of simplifying that view. You can get in trouble a little bit if you don't forget to change back to base, but you just have to be aware. Arbortext tries to make people aware by changing things to red, saying, hey, you're still in HTML, but if you want to go back and style something different, be sure to change that back to base. And there's a fair amount of things that you can do here, like source edits. There's a little column over here, this orange box column, that gives you a view when there's source edits in the style sheet. People sometimes have to go out and create some complicated changes, and Arbortext has provided a tool that indicates that things have source edits now. There's a lot of improvements going on to help people understand what's going on in the style sheet, things that might not have been obvious in the past. You may have noticed there's this different icon, and there's a couple of different ways to flag the person that say, hey, this has a source edit, this little icon down here. For those of you who aren't aware, a source edit is a very powerful mechanism for going above and beyond what you can do in Styler UI. And it lets you tailor that output for a given output formatter. You can add scripts, you can do all kinds of really interesting things using source edits. Of course, with that comes the knowledge to do it and the complexity to maintain those changes. So again, a good plan is important. For example, I'll go and add my boxing module. It has APP source edits, and you'll be able to see what I mean. They mostly come in as property sets, and I changed the print engine already to APP so that I can apply the property sets to specific elements. But I can leverage APP as easily as I can any other rendering engine through Styler as well. APP is the Arbortext Advanced Print Publisher, the tool formerly known as 3v2. APP is another heavy topic that we can talk about later. So let's add that module. I can add, and I've got it up here at the top. I've got a boxing module. It shows all the different things I can do. And we're going to move that up to the top of the hierarchy because we really want it to have precedence. And we'll close, and it's validating to make sure that everything in there is solid style sheet and no garbage. And up here we can go to the property sets, and what we'll see here is that a whole bunch of things got added. All of these have, they say APP has source edits and changes to properties. That's the things down here in this window will have no effect. There's a lot more things here now to give you hints about what's happening and why and where it is and what it was for. All right, so let's come back to the slides really quickly. Just to sum up, We started off by selecting a test document that contains many different contexts that we need to style. We then created a resolved document for styling, and when we did that, we created this intermediary XML file that contained all of the content from our map and topics because it had been published through the pipeline. It's been augmented with additional metadata. It contains all of these related links, and we can show this a different day. It's a heavy topic. We know that it's a special doc type because it's a combination of map and topic elements, so you can save it, but you know that anything you change in the RDS document will not affect the source topics or map. It's a separate, standalone file, so anything you do at this point is specific to that file. We then went to Styler, and we talked about the importance of developing modular style sheets. The starting points for those style sheets is to go out and locate either the modules or the flattened style sheet out in the install tree, copy over a read-only version, and add it to your empty style sheet. Make sure that if you have multiple modules, that the precedence or the priority order is correct. And once you've got all your content into this file, if it's read-only, it's light gray. And you can copy those definitions and make changes to them. And you'll see that with duplicate definitions, the one that's active is bold, the one that's been overridden is light gray italic, and there are some icon indicators to tell you what the precedence is. Be aware that a lot of elements are unstyled by design. There's information about what they were specialized from. And please, don't ever, ever, ever style concept task or reference. It'll monkey up your title numbering, and you don't want to do that. That was pretty much everything we covered. So before we get to the questions, here's a little bit about us and about PTC. And I wanted to take the opportunity to remind everyone about all of the resources available to the Arbortext community. Ours is a large and very tight-knit community. Over the years, things have changed, and particularly after the PTC acquisition, we found that a lot of people don't know all the resources available to them as Arbortext users. I've got a chart here, and this is from the list that we maintain here at Single Sourcing Solutions. The URL for this, the full list, is down at the bottom of the page, because this is really only a partial list of all the available things. If you want the full list and just be able to click on the links to these resources, use the URL at the bottom. Janice, do we have questions?
Yes, ma'am, we do. So one question, and you may have already covered this, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it. How do I compose to different channels using the same style sheet? For example, an editor when composing on a PE server.
So let me show that briefly. It's really very simple. My output formats are right here. I can see what it looks like in the editor. I can see what it will look like in print preview. I can do PDF, HTML, help, web preview, RTF, DMP. I don't have DMP installed, but I can do it right from here.
Okay. Does Styler allow you to preview the source edits?
So source edits are kind of a tricky thing. APP is not, which is what I have here, it's not an easy thing to look at. Mostly I'll do APP, and most people will do APP source edits in Eclipse. There's a whole library and things to do that with, and you don't usually do that. When you step out of Styler, which is what a source edit is, you're stepping out for a reason, and you're using some pretty heavy programming tactics and libraries to help you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Back to the other question that you just answered, a follow-up question on that one was, are those shown in Editor too?
So in the Editor view, let's come over to the actual sample. I would do File, Compose for Web, Print, HTML, PDF, HTML Help, Digital Media Publisher. That's it.
Okay, great. That answered that question. Okay. If you have a question, please feel free to type it into the question box. I think you had everybody's rapt attention. You provide a lot of great information in that presentation.
That's great. So I would say one more thing maybe about when you choose the modular versus the flattened style sheet and why we flatten it. We develop with the modular style sheet architecture, but when we roll it out to the field, we flatten the style sheet. And we flatten it for a number of reasons. it's simpler to keep track of one file, and it improves performance. So what we do is we flatten all of those files. There's a toolbar item in Styler for that. All you do is save a merged style sheet, you flatten that copy, and that would be the copy you deploy out to the field. You do all your development here in the modular architecture and then deploy the flattened merged style sheet out to the field. So if you're deciding, like, do I start with the flattened or do I start with the modular, it can add up and be different reasons, and it kind of depends on what you're doing, how many specializations you have, and what your goals are, and you can kind of go either way. It's pretty easy to do. This is just right there, save merge style sheet.
Okay, I have a question and a comment. I'll go with the comment first, and the comment is excellent information about style sheet architecture and great demo.
Thank you.
So kudos, good job. Another question's come in. Is it possible to link to the out-of-the-box style sheet modules rather than copy them?
You could have, yes. I wanted to monkey around with them, so I copied them to my custom directory. It's always a better idea to copy them off into somewhere else so that you're not depending on the install tree. It's just good practice. Right, and if you're copying them over as read-only, it's not going to hurt you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, put my picture back up. Those
well, while
resources are huge.
Yes, the resources is really important. And of course, they can always find it on our single sourcing solutions website.
Absolutely.
And while I'm waiting to see if any other questions are coming in, just to let everyone know, we are recording this presentation. It will be available to you. We have to do some code conversion on it before it gets posted. It usually takes me a day or two. And you will all get your link to that as soon as it's up and ready for you to review. I have another comment that came in from one of the viewers today and saying, great presentation, Liz.
Thank you.
I have to agree.
Well, we've been using it for over a decade and doing this for longer than that, and our dedication to the community is such that we really want this information to be out there for you to have it, whether you're getting started or you've been a long time doing it, and we hope everyone else exposes what they know to the community as well.
So I have another question, and I'm going to try my best to make sense of this question. So if I massacre it, I do apologize. So earlier you had touched on APP, and one of the questions is why would we want to use APP? So main advantages over FOSSI or XSLFO. Does that make sense?
It does. It's not an easy question. APP is the Advanced Publishing Engine, formerly known as 3B2. You can do, you only go to APP if you have to. Let's start there. APP lets you create pretty much any look and feel you want, whether it's a competitor for InDesign, and you can do it in an automated black box fashion. So, for example, if I were the Canadian government and I'm publishing multilingual legislation, it's very important that my paragraphs line up. Paragraph 3 on the left in English has to be directly opposite paragraph 3 on the right in French. And if the English paragraph runs longer than the French paragraph, when I get to paragraph 4, they must again be side by side. And that can be difficult to do if you don't have something that can just bring that text in and auto-flow it, which APP can do. And it can control all of those things without a lot of machination on your end. That's kind of one of the things that they want to do. It's far beyond just simple, I need a pretty cover page, what APP can do.
It can also handle wrapping around images
if
you have.
True. You can spill text around a clipping path and a graphic. You can do Ruby or Ichu, the special formatting for Japanese text, formal Japanese text. I can print 3 languages on a single line at the same time and auto-flow it so that it's all aligned. The APP is for really advanced typographic publishing requirements. And when you have them, you know it and you need it.
Great, thank you. I have another question that's come in. How difficult is it to work with a DITA customization, that is, to incorporate a style sheet, a custom element with a unique styling that has no fallback style?
Then you would just create a rule for that element and style it appropriately. I mean, it's not different, right? Does that answer the question?
I believe so. Yes,
okay.
It does, yes.
Good.
Okay, we're at just a couple minutes at the top of the hour. Do we have any other questions? Any other comments? Okay.
All right, great. Thank you for attending.
So this will conclude this session for DITA style in Arbortext. It's easy. I hope you were able to see how easy it is. Our next web session coming up is September 23rd. Look for that invitation coming to you, and it is a discussion with a panel of experts on the true ROI of XML. So look for that in your emails coming soon. Thank you very much for attending, and as soon as the recording is ready, we'll be sending out an announcement to you. Have a great day.